Okay. Going live. Oh, Alvaro's already connected.
I think he's connected on YouTube.
Yeah, I saw he put a comment there. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. I'm here with Marc Tétrault. Is that right?
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Happy Jazz Day.
Happy Jazz Day to you.
So just FYI, there's like a 20-second lag between what we say and what comes out in the live stream.
So if I hear cheering like from downstairs, it'll be 20 seconds later?
Yeah. Oh, there's Jazz. Hey, Jazz.
Hey, what's going on?
Can you hear us?
Get my life together. I can. Let's see.
Your volume is a little low.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes. So this is Marc Jazz.
Hello.
Hi.
How are
How's it
you?
going, Mark?
Good. Nice meeting you.
Sorry, it took me a second to get on, hotel internet, so.
Oh, you're at a hotel now.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm just.
Yeah, I was telling Pablo my apartment flooded last week, so we had to move out temporarily until they fix it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So. But anyway.
Here in Montreal, we're the only place in North America that has a curfew right now. So we just went under curfew at 8 o'clock here in Montreal, where you're not allowed to leave your house except for essential services.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like it was like a year ago, like nothing has changed, right?
Yeah, well, the curfew's been in place for 3 months, and it's become our new normal, but it's going to slowly lift. Monday it's going to 9:30, so.
Oh, well, don't make all your plans all at once.
That's right. Party time.
Wow, jeez. Yeah, I hear the vaccine thing is kind of tough up there. So.
Yeah, it's coming along. I got my first dose. Yeah. I think Pablo got his first dose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get? But you didn't. Did you get AstraZeneca?
I got Moderna.
Oh, Moderna. I got AstraZeneca.
Nice. There you go.
That's gonna be the new cruising line at parties now.
Yeah.
So what do you got? What do you got?
Right, exactly. It's like, are you part of the Pfizer family, or where are you?
Just got photobombed by my daughter.
Okay, hold on. The sound I'm hearing is a bit low from the guest. Hold on, let me try to fix that. This is gonna be tricky. Okay, sorry, everyone. Okay, because it's coming out of the speakers. I think that's right. Okay, let me try this.
I'm happy to be a guinea pig in your inaugural live, Pablo.
All right, I think the sound is better, but now I can't hear you, so I'm going to.
No, it's too bad because you missed a good joke from me.
Yeah, right. Wait. So, Mark, are you from Montreal?
Right,
I'm
so
actually
I can't
from.
Hear you too
I'm actually
second, so.
Oh.
Hi.
Hi. How are you in there?
So yeah, I'm actually from Vancouver originally, but I moved out to Montreal in 1997. So I've been here. This is pretty much my home these days. I understand you're in LA. Pablo was just telling me.
Yes. Yep. Here in sunny LA. Yep.
Oh, so
lucky.
Yeah.
Lucky you. Yeah. And you're from Pittsburgh?
Yeah, like kind of. Yeah, lived in Pittsburgh, Nashville, DC, kind of all over the place. So.
Okay.
But liking it out here. It's the best weather place I've lived in. So.
Yeah, that's got to make it. That's got to make a difference in your daily outlook on life.
Oh yeah, huge. Yeah. I lived in Boston before this, and it was just gray and.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
And that's what's called feedback.
Awesome.
Okay. Um, hmm.
Did you learn this stuff at Google, Pablo?
It's part of the professional
Uh,
development.
Okay, I'm gonna come back. I need to get headphones then.
Okay.
So have you ever made it up to Montreal?
No, unfortunately, I would love to go. I have a friend who's from
Okay, I'll be right
Montreal,
back.
and he's always singing its praises. So,
Yeah.
I talked to a couple of people about going to visit last year, like in the summer before all the the COVID hit. Like beginning of last year, we had this list of places we wanted to go, and then that kind of got kibosh there. So,
Yeah. Well, if you can ever make it, I mean, we have a great jazz fest, which you may have heard of.
of course, yeah.
Yeah, and that's like quite an impressive thing because they take basically the center of Montreal, the sort of prime real estate in downtown Montreal, and they close it off to all cars for about 10 days, I think, maybe even 2 weeks, and it's just free outdoor concerts. There's paid indoor concerts, but you can see like amazing acts. I saw Stevie Wonder free outdoor for my 30th birthday 10 years ago.
That's
Just,
pretty good.
yeah, so it's like really, and just amazing acts come through. So it's worth checking out. Absolutely.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of jealous about that. Is that usually like a summertime
Sorry,
thing?
I have to install. I think I'm facing the same issues you faced.
Yeah,
Hey.
that is a summertime thing. It's like usually in late June, and yeah, it
Okay.
goes on
Alright,
for.
what are? I hope you're answering.
Sorry, what was that? I don't even know if he hears us.
So Alvaro, I don't know if you can see the live stream. Alvaro is asking, where are the best places to listen to live jazz in your cities?
You want to start? Do you want to start, Jazz?
Sure. I think probably some of the best places to check out some jazz. Definitely like Catalina Jazz Club for sure. The Baked Potato is cool because you have a mix of things. You can have jazz, you can have fusion, you have some rock thing. Always a cool spot. And there's actually a place downtown called the Blue Whale, and I think they had to close for the pandemic, but hopefully they'll, fingers crossed, like a lot of clubs, pre-pandemic that were with us have had to shutter their doors. So I'm hoping that they might make a comeback. But those would probably be the two, I guess, the three top places that I would think of to see some jazz.
Yeah, yeah. And we definitely miss those live shows. That's like one of the biggest things I miss that I haven't been able to check out in a year. Here in Montreal, we got a few places. One place called the Upstairs, probably the most well known, and they got Monday night jam sessions there with some great musicians. So really miss checking that out. And then a couple other places, Diezons and Cafe Resonance, are both places that you get jazz every night of the week, and sometimes a bit of fusion as well, and different experimental stuff. But over the last 20 years, you've definitely seen a decline in live music venues, both for jazz and for like other popular musics in Montreal. It's definitely like something that just increasingly so I find just less space for live music. And I think in Montreal we are actually spoiled though compared to a lot of Canadian cities, at least, in that we do have like a pretty good density of places to see live shows. But again, it's been going down in the last 20 years, and I'd like to see that trend change. How's it going, Pablo? You all good?
I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but you got to mute one of your sounds or something.
Oh, yes. There we go. Good?
I think so.
Say something, and we'll tell you if you sound like.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's a bit of an echo.
There's still an echo, eh? Oh, okay. Okay, now can you hear me? Wait,
Yeah.
No, but nobody will be. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think that's better.
Yeah, I think it's better too.
Okay, I still have to figure out this streaming issue. I'm still hearing an echo on my end, but it's okay. I hope other people are not dealing with it. Okay, so I heard you were talking about Montreal live jazz scene. Did you get a chance to talk about LA live jazz scene?
Yeah, a little bit. There is actually one other place that I thought of while Mark was talking, over by actually LAX. There's a place that opened up a couple years ago, I think, called Sam First, and they've been inviting some pretty cool acts, like a lot of like newer, like kind of young jazz cats kind of seeing it. It's cool,
And
'cause
every night?
I don't. Well, presently, I don't think every night. I think but most of those places are doing a live streaming. But they were pretty consistent.
Right.
Had a few nights a week of something going on. And it's amazing to me that these clubs aren't expensive, really. A lot of these places you can see some absolutely incredible music for not very much. And like Mark was just talking about, in the last 20 years, there's just been a decline. Like, it's not just Montreal, it's not just LA. I've lived in Boston, lived in Pittsburgh. You just have that slow decline of opportunities to go and see really good music. And I guess there are a lot of reasons for that, but it's kind of a shame. I hope that maybe all this craziness we've had this last year has helped us to kind of realize how much we miss it, and maybe it'll allow all of us to try to reinvest.
You got to figure with, like you mentioned, that like it doesn't cost very much to go see it, and you got to figure the fact that it's cheap and the fact that there's decline in sort of live venues. It's not what it used to be, being like a professional musician. 20, 30 years ago, you could make a pretty decent living doing it, just playing gigs every night. And nowadays, it's like you can't even do that. You can't even play gigs every night and get a good pay for it. People will pay you sometimes just the door, right? And so sometimes you have to walk away with $50. It's not a living wage, right? So you see, I think it's probably gotten a lot tougher for professional musicians. Yeah,
and I think it also depends on the city. Like I used to live in Montreal, and it was awesome. Just the music scene was there. Now we live in Ottawa, and it's not as vibrant as Montreal, musically speaking, especially for jazz. Like, that's one of the things that I found difficult, just finding a place where you can play or watch jazz regularly. And so there is like a hotel, right, that has jazz every night, but it's in a restaurant, and the people aren't going there to watch jazz. They're hotel guests that want to have dinner, and so they kind of want background jazz, which is fine in some situations. But if you're trying to like make your music and be artistic about it, it's not the ideal situation when they're telling you to turn it down.
Yeah. Well, what they say about Ottawa, it's where people go to die, right?
Oh, wow. That's right. Yikes! Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks.
That's that's tough though, but it's true though. You end up just being kind of like the wallpaper, right? Just kind of become part of the background, and I mean, people are making the same money now for a gig that they were making, in 1990. You're still getting paid maybe $100 for a gig for some of these things, and I'm not talking about you've got like top tier, jazz acts and stuff like that obviously have a great negotiated contract. But even still, like, some of those guys, kind of wonder if they weren't making quite a bit more, 20, 30 years ago than now. You know what I mean? It's like the idea is that the better you are, you should be getting more compensation, really, for your art, and that doesn't really seem to be happening. So
and I think also one thing that always bugs me is, and it must be even worse for you, Jazz, as a drummer, they tell you, we'll pay you this amount for like an hour of music, right? But it's not just an hour. Like, you have to do a sound check and bring your gear and like have a set break, and by the end of the day, it's like half a day that you've spent on
and
that,
practice
and you get paid for an hour.
And practice the music too. Like, if you're told you have to learn 5 new songs, there's that's hours of work in there, right?
But you
So
get
that-
for that 1 hour that you're on stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, they don't see it. You know, okay, we're paying you for a 3-hour gig, but you had to get up that morning, you had to pack up all your gear, you had to do however long the drive is to the gig or the flight is to the gig, all of those things. So, you know, if they pay you, say, $500 to do a 2-hour gig, you worked probably at least 12 hours to get there.
Yeah.
So, you know, like the rate of pay is actually not great. But like all
That's
things
less than
considered.
minimum wage, often.
Yeah, right. Yeah, kind of a little bit, you know,
Yeah.
especially given how much time and energy, blood, sweat, and tears you put into honing your craft.
For sure.
And, you know, yeah, it definitely makes you feel some kind of way.
Part of the reason I became a vocalist is so I wouldn't have to lug around gear, just my microphone.
You know, that's a good idea. I always thought, every time I had to pack up drums, I thought to myself, I should have played the flute or something, you know, just something like something small.
Well, as a piano player now, like I try to. I mean, I'm fortunate that I don't depend on live gigs, but now I'm selective and I prefer to only play in places where there's a piano there, so I don't have to carry my keyboard around.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, you've got your keyboard, you've got amps, you've got all of that, you know. Yeah.
So Michelle Sinclair is asking, who are your favorite jazz artists? Maybe I'll start with you, Jazz.
Oh, that's not fair. Okay, a living or dead? Like we
Doesn't
have
matter.
to. No, it doesn't matter. Oh, okay. Well, that's tough. Why do you have to start with me? Okay, well, probably I probably got into jazz due to Chick Corea. You know, I think Pablo, we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I was, like kind of familiar with Art Blakey, who is from Pittsburgh, where I'm from, or John Coltrane, Miles Davis. I knew these names, but it wasn't until I saw Chick Corea doing a trio gig with John Patitucci on bass and I think it was Dave Weckl on drums playing Chick's song "Got a Match," and it absolutely blew my mind. Like, could not, like, to this day, I still haven't like heard anything that like got me quite like that. Like I felt shook. You know what I mean? Like actually, like physically taken by, I don't know what this is, but I want to do that. You know, that kind of thing. So I think that's probably of all the artists that I absolutely love. You know, that's probably the moment that got me into jazz. So I probably have to just go straight to Chick. And unfortunately, we lost him back in February, right? So but what a legacy, right?
Oh man, Chick's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, that's kind of how I got into jazz as well. I mean, Chick and John McLaughlin, those two. I didn't like jazz until it was like early 20s. What about you, Mark?
Well, definitely Chick Corea is fantastic. Though I will say that I kind of understood his genius later on in life because I think my ability to appreciate jazz has changed over time. And I think when I first got into jazz, it was more of the early stuff, like Billie Holiday and Lester Young and people like that. And I think part of it was because the earlier jazz is almost harmonically a bit simpler. It's the melody is more focus, and so it was just easier for my brain to kind of grasp. And as I think as you listen to more jazz, stuff like the later stuff that comes later, bebop era and all that stuff, which when you first hear bebop as someone who hasn't heard a lot of jazz, it's kind of almost like noise because your brain just can't really wrap its head around it. But when you sort of listen to it more and more, the chords start to understand how the melody and the chords are playing with each other, and your brain can make some sense of it. So it's only later that I got into sort of more other later jazz. In terms of other vocalists, really into. I mean, Bobby McFerrin for me is just like a god. And there's a great Chick Corea and Bobby McFerrin collaboration. That,
Play.
so yeah, it's like just so for me, like kind of embodies like what jazz is about. That kind of sort of interchange that they have, that dialogue that they have between each other. It's really just sort of, for me, some of the best. You listen to that, it's just like ear candy. Yeah, and just
in the liner notes of that album, I love it's. They say the reason they chose that name is because when you go to a new music teacher or something, they tell you it's just play, and play is like a joyful thing, and that's what they basically do in that live concert.
Yeah, it totally comes out like you're feeling the joy from that. And then more like in terms of other vocalists, like more recently, Kurt Elling is definitely a inspiration. Just like really, really good. But there's so many, and just it's hard to a hard question to answer, right? Because I think another thing about jazz is just it's really like the expression of oneself, and there's so many different expressions out there, unique expressions that are all like sort of contribute to jazz, and that they're all kind of important, and they're all different, and they all brought something different. And as someone who likes to perform jazz, it's like how do you bring your own self to that? Is the sort of the constant struggle, and you do that through practice, and you try to get as good as you can at your instrument. And then after that, it's just sort of how do you express yourself? How do you show the world your voice, kind of thing. So it's one of the great things I find about jazz as a medium.
Yeah, I remember when I was starting to get into jazz, I took some piano lessons with a jazz piano player in Montreal, and because I had never really grown up listening to jazz, the swing feel was something I actually struggled with, because I was very like rock and roll, so like straight eighths and things like that. And so he was trying to get me to do transcriptions and try to get the swing feel. But then at one point I remember I was doing a transcription. I was trying to make it sound exactly like, I think it was Keith Jarrett or something. Obviously I'm never gonna do that, but he was telling me like, don't go too far there, because you do still you have a voice, and you want to keep that voice, but still within the swing feel. And I feel like that's often a struggle that I've heard, like people that are studying jazz, because they do all these transcriptions, and you're trying to sound like your heroes, and sometimes you hear like the standard jazz solo, especially when it's younger people, and it sounds like great, it sounds like jazz and very technically proficient. But for me, the artists that I love the most, it's like I can hear 5 seconds, it's like I know who that is. And it's just like that voice, even just Brad Mehldau, for instance, I can hear like a chord, just where he places that chord and how he voices that chord. It's like, oh yeah, that's Brad. Or like Bill Frisell is another one that I can really just easily identify. And I think that voice is just really hard to develop and get. And it's the great masters that are so technically proficient, theoretically proficient, but also have their uniqueness too.
Yeah, I'd say definitely Chick Corea too is also very like recognizable. When you hear it, it's just like he's just doing, it's just his creativity is just so unique and identifiable.
So somebody is upset that we're and rightfully so, that we haven't given any love to Herbie Hancock and Kendrick Scott. Herbie is such a huge influence. He's the master as well. I mean, of the living legends of jazz, I mean, he's one of the few remaining legends of jazz, that have come all the way from Miles Davis and done so much. And he is really a person that I've admired, and I think Miles was similar, that just reinventing themselves and not being satisfied with, like being the geniuses they already are and the type of music they're already making. It's just like constantly trying new things and bringing influences from pop music and rock music and collaborating with people from those genres as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, it's like we could spend hours and days talking about all the jazz artists that are amazing. You know what I mean? It's like Herbie's I mean, he's a legend. Kendrick is awesome and one of the coolest cats, you know.
Yeah.
But like, there's just like such a long running list of just like a rich list of jazz history, you know, past and present, you know, like, and you know, looking for, you know, to the future, you know, like a Kamasi Washington, you know, like that kind of thing, right? It's like there's so much happening, and whenever you talk about it, you get really excited, right? Because you remember why you love this.
Yeah.
You know, on those times, you know, like when we were talking about, oh, you know, it's kind of tough with gigs, and you know, how can people recognize the art? But then you start talking about all these artists that we love so much, and you know, you feel that joy.
Yeah.
That you're talking about, Pablo, right? Like it makes you like, I don't have my drums with me right now, but it makes me want to go and play.
Yeah.
You know, and it makes me miss playing with people. You know.
Yeah. Oh, that I miss so much. It was so cool to do the online collaboration, but still, it was just like, oh, I wish we were in the same room.
Same.
But yeah, that's interesting, Mark, what you were saying about like how earlier you liked, you know, LF and Lester Young and things like that, which maybe are less harmonically or rhythmically complex, and so you can wrap your mind around that if your ear isn't as attuned to jazz. So there's this concept from neuroscience or psychology. It's called the Wundt curve, where it's so you have on one side like perfectly predictable, and on the other side like completely random, right? So if you think of music, like completely random music, nobody really likes because it's just completely random, and completely predictable, you know, like it has its place, but like nursery rhymes or something like that. But most adults don't choose to listen to nursery rhymes, you know, when they're trying to relax. And so there's that point in the middle where you have the sweet spot between predictable enough but novel enough so that it's not boring. And I feel like with jazz, it's sort of like that. For me as well, like at the beginning, I just didn't get it. And so I didn't quite like, same with salsa music. I didn't really like salsa music because I didn't understand it and the rhythm didn't understand. And then once you start understanding it, at least for me, I start sort of itching for, okay, well, now what else can you do with that? And jazz, I think, what I love about it is it allows you to really push that as far as you want, and it really allows so much freedom within like the genre that you're playing.
But I mean, someone who hasn't listened to a lot of it, I can definitely understand them not appreciating it. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate jazz because their ears haven't listened to it enough. And so they can't make sense of it. It really does sound like chaos to them. And like for myself, I think like, you know, I only recently did some jazz studies. Like I listened to jazz a lot younger, but I'd never had someone explain to me the theory behind, you know, how the chords work together, and just like understanding what, like, you know, an AABA form, and you know, how a chord progression works and what you can do within that chord progression. And in studying that, I appreciated the music much more. And not to say that you need to study it to appreciate it, because a lot of greats didn't study it and just learned it from being around it and being fully immersed in it constantly, right? Like you have someone like Ella Fitzgerald, who was like an amazing improviser, but wasn't like, you know, no one ever taught her how to improvise, really. It was just being, you know, at gigs every day with like amazing players and hearing these amazing solos and hearing how, you know, all this language being thrown at her, and just her brain just absorbed it, you know, and she was able to absorb it and then just put it out spontaneously when it came her time to shine. And so it is like, you know, when you do sort of, when your ear does start to understand it, it really is amazing feeling of how it just sort of envelopes you in this, like, just, you know, like a complex jazz chord voicing, just sort of, it's like, you know, it's like sitting on a pillow or something like that, you know, it's just so comforting.
Yeah. It's, so I agree. And I think part of the difficulty is getting people to want to get to that level, right? To want to go to live shows and sort of absorb all that culture and all the stuff that makes jazz what it is. Like once you get into it and you seek it out, but I want to get more people seeking it out and then understanding it. There was the conductor here in Ottawa for classical music. He started doing these things where he'd sort of explain pieces before, because classical music I think suffers from similar things, right? Like they're really long pieces and there is like a structure to them and there's a form to them. And, you know, people get confused about, do I clap or do I not? Like, why are they not playing right now? And if you understand the structure and you understand the form, which, by the way, I think people should clap whenever they want, because it's like whatever. Like, if you're excited about the music, you should show it. But he explains sort of, okay, so this sonata form, and so you repeat this part twice, and then there's going to be this development where you're going to hear the themes but sort of moved around, and then you'll come back to the original theme. So here, look out for that. And I think giving people that grounding so that they can understand what they're hearing, I think then they start to make the connections and appreciate it more.
Totally.
Right, we're talking about, accessibility.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of what we're looking at. So if you have something that's, you have like a John McLaughlin or like a Mahavishnu orchestra or something like that is like, okay, this can be like a little, sometimes a little out or a little heavy, but then you have, like we're talking about, like Ella Fitzgerald or somebody more recent, like a Roy Hargrove, where you have like a nice little kind of groove that, kind of crosses over a little bit and invites people into this genre where it's like, everybody's welcome here, like it's not that different, kind of like we were trying to do, Pablo, with you and I and Paul there with My Favorite Things. It's like, we know this song, everybody knows this song, this is not a foreign thing, so I think that the more you know something, that's really, how can you love something unless you know about it? You can't expect somebody to want something unless they know about it, unless there's something about it that that already speaks to them.
Yeah. And I think, so it's funny you mentioned Mahavishnu Orchestra, because that's actually how I got into jazz. Because I was really into hard rock at the time, right? And so a friend was like, oh, you should listen to this band. And so I went and bought an album in the record store when you could still go into this, and put it in my Discman, and it was just like, kind of like what you described with Got a Match. He's like, what is this? It's like rock, but more complicated, and this guy's a virtuoso. And then I was like, oh, okay, this is like this jazz fusion thing. So let's check out the jazz part of it. And that's how I got into it. But yeah, I think it's giving people that element that they can relate to. And there's like, oh, okay, it's not that foreign. It's not that weird and random a thing. There's like something I can hold on to.
Well, it's funny because I remember like you getting to that stuff and like also like Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
And at the time you playing it for me, and at that time my ears weren't ready for it. Like, and I just like, what is this? I can't listen to this. And it's a good example of stuff I can go back to now and be like, oh yeah, okay, now I get it, right? But yeah, just like it's funny how your ears are develop over time and how what was once sort of dissonant becomes more consonant to your ears.
But I think it goes the other way around as well. And so part of the reason, I think I mentioned this to you, Jazz, part of the reason I didn't like jazz when I was growing up is because, I was into rock and roll and all that stuff. And my dad had some jazz albums at home. He had like John Coltrane's ballads, right? Mm-hmm. So he put that on. I was like, oh, this is boring. It's like old people music. It's like slow, and where's the energy?
Right.
And so I was like, oh, I don't like jazz. And so I just didn't listen to it at all. And now that album is amazing. Like it's
right.
You really appreciate it, and it's kind of going the other way. Maybe it's just me being an old person now.
Are you saying you don't like rock and roll anymore?
Oh, I love rock and roll, man.
Right.
I like it all.
Yeah, that's funny. We're we kind of develop our own sort of weird bias toward things that we don't know. Right? It's like we hear one thing that is described as jazz that we think is kind of boring, or like elevator music or whatever. And we go, oh, well, that's all jazz, and we don't want it. I know what it's all about. It's terrible. I don't want to listen to it. It's boring, you know? And so we carry that with us, right?
Yeah.
We carry that. So anytime somebody says, oh, there's this cool jazz thing, that's like immediately like, no, I already know about it. But you don't know anything about it. That's the funny thing, right? Is that we're like, we've got this built-in sort of fear of the unknown. So we just don't want to touch it.
And I think part of it is just this, like, maybe it came from like record stores, like this obsession of categorizing things into, is it jazz or is it rock or is it, you know, metal or whatever. It's like nowadays it's getting so hard to distinguish between all of these because there's so much crossover and collaboration. And actually this is related to a question on the chat. It says, do you all like Latin jazz, and how would you explain how it is different from other types of jazz?
Who asked that question?
Yeah, who are you?
I won't say who it is.
I would just say, you know, it's about influences. You know, it's about, you know, jazz is an amalgamation of all kinds of influences. You know, we've got rhythms from Africa. You know, we've got influences from the Caribbean. We've got, you know, influences from European music. So it's like all these things that kind of have grown together, and so it's like more or less of one thing or the other that kind of makes it more Latin jazz. You know what I mean? Or, you know, you can even kind of go a little bit more micro and talk about the kinds of jazz that are coming from Colombia or from Cuba or from Argentina, you know, like those kinds of influences that make this kind of artist a little bit different, you know? So, you know, if we talk about Latin jazz, it's so general. We gotta be specific, right?
Like Piazzolla versus, you know, Chucho Valdez or something.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's a big field. But if I were to narrow down for me personally, like I have a big love for Cuban jazz, and just like, you know, these old songs, just beautiful melodies. I don't know, just I really have and just that sort of island vibe. I've always been just a really big fan of. Yeah, and you know, it is interesting, like to look at the, you know, the African roots of all, you know, of jazz and Latin jazz, and you sort of and obviously there is a blending of European and African roots when we look at jazz and modern pop music. But what I think, you know, the African side brought to it versus like the, you know, in classical music, in European classical music, the idea was, you know, it was very much coming out of the church, and like the idea that, you know, you want to play your instrument perfectly, you know, like, you know, in a godlike way. And so like the idea was to really master your instrument and master that, get a godly sound, if you will. Whereas in a more African tradition, from my understanding, the role music played in society was much more as an expression of oneself, of individual expression, and what did you have to add to the story. And I feel like that is really like a thread that sort of we see in jazz, and that kind of spilled over from jazz into, like, you know, most of the music that we listen to now, which is just like everyone's, what is your story? What are you bringing new to this thing? And that just cuts across all genres today. And that's not something that, you know, classical has, is that difference, I think.
Yeah. So this makes me think of, there's this video by Adam Neely, you might know, he's like this famous YouTuber, jazz bass player, really good. He has this video called Music Theory and White Supremacy.
Oh, yes.
Have you seen that?
I think, yeah.
So he talks about this, it's very related to what you're saying, Mark, where, you know, the music theory we teach in schools, it's like European music theory. So they took a lot of the music that comes from other cultures and sort of packaged it into this music theory. And, oh no, that's a sus chord, that's what you're playing there. And that rhythm, that's a 3/4 or whatever. But like back in before all this was codified, you know, a lot of in Africa, a lot of the rhythms and things they play was for dance, right? So if you got into music, it was via dance. So you had to learn how to dance to play music. So really feel it inside it as a visceral thing more than an academic thing that music theory can often be associated with. And I think that's like a really important part of like this unique personality that different jazz musicians have, like whether it's like coming from this visceral insight through this, training regimen and like all this practice and all that stuff, or if it really is just like an academic virtuosic performance that is impressive, but maybe lacks a bit of that soul. That's what makes it special.
Totally.
Let me see. There's a couple questions here. Oh, so Alvaro says, my brother, perhaps that is why jazz artists like standards so much. They can improvise in the more predictable parts.
Well, yeah. I mean, the standards give us like a sort of a form for which we can like express ourselves in, right? So you have, thousands of versions of Body and Soul, for instance, right? But they're all different, and like the way Coleman Hawkins did Body and Soul is going to be way different than the way Cannonball Adderley would do it, and it'd be completely two different things. But one thing that I've, having come to jazz somewhat later and sort of being in the early stages of getting to know the sort of jazz standards repertoire, I've found one thing that I've really just sort of loved about it is tapping into this something that, you're learning a song that was written in the 1930s and you're giving your own expression to it. But you're also kind of, you feel like a part of this tradition that is still and I think you sort of tapped into that earlier, Jazz, that's still there. It's still vibrant. It's still alive. It's an art form that is like, you can take that song from the 1930s and give it your own thing, and it can still be fresh, and it can still be something that we're doing something new. You're giving something new, and something that you're taking part in that tradition of borrowing from the old, adding your own thing to it. You might do something that other people will want to emulate later on, and give their little thing to it, their little spice. So, yeah, it's my spiel on standards.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, like,
go ahead.
Oh, good. Okay. No, I was gonna say, I mean, standards are just crucial for learning. There's no way around it. It's kind of like, if you're learning another language, right? Say I'm studying Spanish. It's like, okay, I've gone through, my grammar, my verbs, and all these things. Now I need some text. I need something that I can read. I need a show. I need something that I can watch so I can actually see where this works, how this makes sense. It's like you can see how, okay, I guess this sort of makes sense on paper, but when you see it come alive off the paper and you put yourself into it, there's predictability in terms of that there is a form, there is a structure, but it also is sort of like a sandbox, right? And like coding terms, you get to sort of play around, so you don't break a program, because you can put your things in there, and eventually, this B section is gonna and we're gonna go back up to the A, so you can kind of you can feel a freedom in the constraints, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
a little bit. What I mean?
Absolutely. And I think one of the cool things about standards, and you can see it in the video, like when we were doing the jazz version of My Favorite Things, right? So you start off and there's the melody, so you have the notes there. But then when we go into the solos, and this is what you get if you use an app like iReal Pro or something, right? So you just it's mostly white space in that page and just chord names in the bars. And so basically that means you can do whatever you want. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You just have to play with the other people and make it work. And so when we met with Paul before making the video, one of the things he said that really resonated with me, that I think is special about jazz, is like, you can have, a 70-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 4-year-old, all genders, all races, doesn't matter. You can throw them on stage and say, let's do blues in F. And everybody knows what you're doing, and you can just play it. Or let's play All of Me, and you can all just and sound like you've been playing together for a long time, but really it's just like this common basis, the language that you can all sort of build on, and you're riffing off of each other and improvising.
I don't know how well the 4-year-old's improvising though.
I said 14.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I don't know about 14.
Hey, I'm not coming for the toddlers. But it's true, because I've definitely been on gigs where it's like, okay, you get the call, you get the details, you show up, you play the tunes, and then afterward, people come up and go, "Oh man, you guys sound so great. How long have you been playing together?" It's like, we've been playing together for 2 hours.
Yeah.
You know, like this is the first time we've met. You
Yeah.
know, I've never met this person before in my life, but those standards are kind of like a uniting, you know, sort of like, I don't want to call it like a sacred text, but almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's that
Yeah.
tradition. You know, those real books.
It's true.
Yeah.
You can go to like any city, you know, in North America and find a jazz bar, go in there and like, you know, if there's a, you know, if there's a improv night or something like that, you can go up there and okay, let's play All the Things You Are, you know, in A flat, whatever, and just they'll know that song, and you'll just play that song, and everyone, you know, it'll sound like, you know, if you got good musicians together, it'll sound like you guys have been a band that's well rehearsed, right? And it is, you know, it is really impressive too when you get to play with some of these musicians that have been doing it since they were, you know, little kids, and they've been playing jazz for the last 40 years, and you play with them and they just elevate everyone, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, there's this famous story, Miles Davis talking about Herbie Hancock, that I think it's in Herbie Hancock's biography, where he says, like, when he had, in the early days when he had joined Miles Davis's quintet, and they were on tour, and they were playing some song, I can't remember which one, and Miles was doing a solo, and Herbie said he just messed up the chord, and he played like the wrong chord, and he just froze, and Miles stopped playing, and instead of, like, you know, admonishing him or something, he just like took that and started riffing on that like dissonant sounding chord, and just made it work. And I think that's exactly like what the pros do. Like they own those errors and make something out of it.
Yeah, and I guess that's why, like, you know, part of being a jazz musician is, you know, expressing oneself, but also it's ideally practicing like crazy to get to be able to not have any impediments on expressing yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it just purely coming from like sort of you're not thinking about what you're doing, you're just doing it because you practice so much, and it just your true essence is kind of just coming out, right?
So there's
not saying I practice that much.
One of Frank Zappa's keyboard players, Tommy Mars, I read somewhere in an interview that he said as a kid he grew up playing classical music and he'd win contests a lot. And he said, I always made mistakes, like in playing classical music, I'd play the wrong notes. But he said the big difference was we all made mistakes, but the kids, most of the other kids would make mistakes and freeze, you know, and it's like, all right, I have to start again. He's like, I would just continue playing. Like, I'm still on the rhythm, playing wrong notes, but then I just kind of noodle around and then find my way back in the piece. And so then it sounds kind of like I never made a mistake if you don't know the piece that well. And I think that's like really the mark of somebody that's really proficient in what they do. Like they know how to make mistakes. And not just in music, but just in general. Like, you know how to get out of the holes you might dig yourself into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can't imagine digging myself a hole in piano. I mean, like, for me, piano players are the ones that I think just blow my mind away the most, just with the amount of coordination that's happening. And it's like you have to be thinking like rhythmically, melodically, harmonically. You know, you got your 10 fingers, you got your 2 legs. It's pretty intense.
Organ players, man, like they play with the bass line on their feet.
It's wild.
Yeah, especially if you know, a lot of you know, particularly black gospel churches.
Yeah,
the keyboard players, you know, the organists really are just like the most masterful musicians I've seen. They're pulling, and they got this, and they got the feet going on the bass. It's nope.
So much going on.
There's no way. You know, I've got 4 limbs going all the time, but that's some extra stuff because you've got all these digits that you have to control, and you have to get it right, and you know, and not actually smash two keys at the same time. You know.
But I think a lot of it is to what you're saying, Mark. A lot of like the admiration we have for other instruments, because for me, it's part of it is with drummers. Like the independence that drummers has with their 4 limbs, I'm always like amazed by, and I think it like the sort of unfamiliarity with whatever instrument that you're playing I think adds to like whatever admiration you have of that instrument. Like I remember I went to a drum workshop of with Antonio Sanchez, the Mexican drum.
He's awesome.
He's
yeah,
incredible.
And
so he's like does a lot of Latin stuff as well. So he starts, okay, my right foot I'm gonna do tumbao on the bass drum, and then with my left foot I'm gonna do like clave on the hi-hat. And then with my left hand I'm gonna do on the rim of the snare like a clave but in 5. And so all of these at the same time, and then with my right hand I'm gonna solo. And so he could stop any limb at any point, and the others are continuing kind of like this.
And so Antonio, he's also a classically trained pianist. So he's a phenomenal musician, and composer. He did was that Birdman? He's doing some other shows, but I remember seeing a clinic with him several years ago, probably about 10 years ago now, where he did like that sort of a kind of a demo, if you will, and somebody in the audience said, "Oh man, how do you do that? How'd you do that thing?" And I'm paraphrasing here, but I never forget this. He's like, it's not, you're asking the wrong question. It's not really about the how, it's the why. Like, why am I doing it? Like, why is is it still musical? Is it you know what I mean? Like that's always the consideration. It's not just, you stay at home and you shed and you do your thing just because, or you want to be prepared for a gig, but like, why are you doing it?
And I think that's super important. That's a great point, because and it comes back to the soul of things. Like you can be technically proficient and be like like a MIDI instrument or something. Playing everything that's exactly that. But if it doesn't, I remember with Mark actually. So Mark and I used to be in a rock band together. And at one point I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. we wanted to do 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover.
Yeah.
And that drum, the Steve Gadd's
drum. Yeah.
And so a drummer we had at the time had found the sheet music for this. And so he was playing it, and we're like, that's not it. He's like, but that's what's written in the notes. Like, I don't care what the notes say, that's not it.
Right, you gotta listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't sound good, like, who cares? Maybe the notes were printed incorrectly or something, but you gotta make it sound good. Overcorrect.
Right.
But speaking of holes, I thought it'd be fun if you're willing to share what's the worst live blunder you've had when playing jazz.
Mark, you go first because I got to think about this one. You're muted, Mark. You
have no blunders.
Mark. Unmute.
Right, there we go. Sorry, I had to mute there because my daughters are making noise in the background.
Okay.
But so as I mentioned a bit before, like I'm relatively new to like jazz performance, and so I haven't had a lot of opportunity to perform it live. But the times that I have had to perform it, there's one just like it's nothing big, but it's just sort of like. It was a jam session, and it was the drummer takes the drum solo, and I just like lost track of the form completely. And so when it came time, when we got to the back to the top of the chorus, everyone else knew except me, right? So I think that was probably my biggest blunder, but I'm sure I'll make. I do plan on doing jazz performance increasingly as I grow older, and so I'm sure I'll have some better stories for you at a future point.
What about you, Chaz? I have one if you still think.
No, I just thought about it because you said jam session, and I do remember this. So I think I've been playing jazz for maybe about a year or so. And I'd gone to a jam session in Pittsburgh with some absolutely phenomenal musicians on the stage. And I had recently gotten into, I get really like Vinny Colaiuta, the drummer Vinny Colaiuta, right? And he's just like time means nothing for him. Yeah. He can play an 11/16 and it'll feel amazing, right? And so I decided, like, we were playing like a jazzy, kind of like groovy kind of thing, and so I decided that I was going to be cute and change the field, change the time. So instead of playing in 4, I decided to start playing in 5. And I thought I was being really cute, and everybody just stopped and looked at me. And I was like, what? And it kept going. And so eventually, we brought it back to 4, and it ended. And the drummer that I was sitting in, on his kit, he came up to me, and he's like, man, if you see the people moving, you see the people, enjoying, don't mess with it. Stop, leave it alone. You don't have to do all that. Nobody cares. And that was the thing with jazz. It is this community, sort of effort. You got the people you're playing with, the people you're playing for. So if you just kind of go off, really go way off script because you just feel like doing your own thing and leaving everybody behind, it's it's not a good look.
Yeah.
So, I was very embarrassed after that.
but kudos to you for trying though.
Yeah.
I did. I was right. Exactly. Yeah. You don't learn if you always do the right thing, right? Those are the biggest lessons is when you kind of screw it up.
Yeah,
So
and that's yeah.
No, go ahead.
I just to finish on that point. That is one of the sort of the tricky parts with jazz is getting out of your comfort zone and and trying to do things that you're not expecting yourself to do, and sort of not sort of sticking with the same old constantly for yourself. And and that's what makes it exciting, but it's also very kind of scary too. I think.
Yeah. So my worst blunder was actually in Pittsburgh as well.
Oh,
They
yeah.
asked me to sub in for this big band, play piano for this big band. And I was like, all right, fine. But I was like, can you please give me the songs we're going to play first? Because I just like to go over them first. I don't feel super comfortable sight reading, for the first time in live shows. So the leader was like, yeah, sure, I'll get it to you. And I kept on yeah, I'll get it to you. And I was just like, the show is Saturday and it's Wednesday. He shows up Friday evening with this giant box of sheet music. He's like, here. And I was like, what? And he's like, well, we haven't picked the songs yet. We'll pay some of them. Just bring those tomorrow. And I was like, there's 300 songs here. So I went through over a couple. I was like, I have no idea. So I show up the next day, and then they had a meeting beforehand, and they were calling out the songs. And so I was going through this box, trying to find the songs. And it's okay, here's this one, and trying to figure out, okay, careful with this part, whatever. Anyway, we get on stage, and I'm playing very lightly and just treading lightly. And then they call some song, and I couldn't remember what song it was. And they pull out the sheet music, and it says, Piano Intro Montuno. And I was like, all right, well, I mean, I know how to do a Montuno. Those chords are okay. And so the drum was 1, 2, 3, and I started playing the Montuno. And then the whole band, 8 bars of that, then the whole band comes in, and I'm in a different key. So there were 2 versions of this chart, right? One for vocalists and one for just non-vocalists. And this was the non-vocalist we were playing, and I had the vocalist chart. Oh my! It was just what happened?
No.
So what did you do?
Yeah.
I just kind of pulled back, and then the bass player was trying to call out the chords. He was telling me we're 4th down, or whatever. I was like, I can't do this math in my head.
I'm not transposing right now.
Yeah. I was already so stressed, and never got called back.
That sounds awful.
Yeah.
But it was the guy's fault too for giving you the shitty lead sheet, though, no?
Yeah. I mean, I just didn't know. I guess they called out instrumental, but I was just scrambling to find the sheets, and I still found the song name. I was like, all right, it must be this. I didn't realize there were multiple versions of all of the songs. But yeah, they should have checked with the new piano player and make sure he had all the right music.
Right. Wow. You're going to have to tell me who that is, too. I want to know. You can tell me offline.
Yeah, I'll tell you offline. No, he's great. He's great. It's just, I guess they've been playing with the same piano player for a long time.
Yeah.
And so, they weren't used to a new piano player.
Yeah.
So are you still doing live shows, Jess?
Not right now.
There are no live shows in the...
I don't think there are any live shows. I think that there might be. I know that some folks have been doing live streaming shows, so that they'll stream from a club. but I don't think that you're allowed to do indoor shows
But what about
here.
outdoor with the nice weather you have there?
I think they might have changed it. So I mean, it's all about COVID. It's all about like our different tiers that we're allowed to be in. So I'm still not totally sure because for Los Angeles County, it's like a county by county and city by city, that kind of thing. So some places have been a little more choose your own adventure in terms of do whatever. But LA, because we had a lot of COVID cases and hospitalizations there for quite a while, they're very strict.
In Twitter, I've seen like in New York City, they've been having like a number of like live shows outside. I mean, probably for limited audience, but it's kind of cool to see that it's starting to come back a little bit.
Yeah, I think it is starting to come back slowly. And there are some places where it is like a limited, you have to be spaced or like pod sort of thing. But I haven't played any of those shows yet.
Yeah, it's Montreal is still not at all open.
Montreal's not open, but they do have like on the weekends when it's nice out here, they've been doing some like outdoor shows in front of Diezons.
Okay.
So yeah, just people walking by the street can check out some live jazz there. So that's, I think, the first live jazz that I've heard of happening this year. So that's got to feel good. I haven't checked any of it out yet, but I look forward to that. And I think very soon we're gonna have, as the weather gets nicer, they close off streets here, and so there's gonna be a lot of opportunity to see some live music outside. At the very least, the end is closer than the beginning of this pandemic. Yeah. So we're getting there.
Yeah, hope so.
So, what are your thoughts about streaming live jazz? Have you done any of it? Or?
I've done a little bit. I've done more like remote recordings and stuff like that. I think it's cool. I think it's a good opportunity for both obviously the band, the musicians, but also for the venue. If the venue can, sort of keep the lights on, keep people coming in, at least like the band coming in, because you get paid $10-$20 to see for a live stream.
Yeah.
Or in some cases it's free. It's totally free. So it's I think it's a great idea, really.
Yeah.
And I don't think that even as things come back, I don't think it's something that's going to go away entirely. I think live streaming, it might actually be here to stay. There'll be the audience.
Yeah.
And there was some live streaming before, but I think it'll be even more so now.
But I think the technology has also sort of like been developed quite a bit more to accommodate this stuff. Like Jack Trip. Have you heard of Jack Trip?
I don't think so.
So it's this software that you can basically play in real time with other people over the internet.
Yeah. How's the latency?
So that's what the software helps you resolve. So there's some tricks you have to not over Wi-Fi, but like you have to connect with a cable. And the people you have to be playing with have to be like within I don't know, like 100k radius, 100 kilometer radius. So same city type of thing. But Dan Tepfer, who's this jazz piano player in New York City, he's been doing like regular shows with other people via this Jack Trip, and it sounds great.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of complicated to set up. Like I think he has to probably walk everybody step by step and how you do it. But if they can make that simpler, it's a kind of cool idea, especially when you're in a situation like this. But also I think for people, that like maybe Mark and I can do a thing, like even though Ottawa and Montreal isn't super far away, so maybe it could still work there. Being in different cities makes it difficult for us to play together regularly. And for other people as well, if you have kids, maybe you can't go out to jam sessions as much anymore. But once the kids are in bed, maybe you can hook up to Jack Trip with your friends and have a live stream or a live show or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like from the perspective of a musician, the idea of either live streaming or some sort of song collaboration where you make a video. It's been a lot of that during COVID. I feel like from the musician's point of view, it's a nice sort of alternative in the absence of being able to play live with each other. it's a good opportunity to still connect with other musicians. I will say though, from like personally speaking, from like a a listener's perspective though, I like watching things on I like watching sort of some of Emmett Cohen's stuff. It's fun to tap into, and it's watching like a Tiny Desk show is great, but it's still never the same. It's just not the same as seeing like a live show and being in the audience. It's also not the same for the musician too, right? Like the musician gets that feedback.
Yeah.
So I think that it will. I do agree with you, Jazz. It's here to stay. I think we're going to see that. It's not going to end with COVID. The live streaming and like the online collaboration stuff, and that's great. But it'll never fully replace the live experience.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible. But it is. I think it's a good opportunity for somebody who say is in the middle of Nebraska or somewhere in Idaho who wouldn't be able to go and see these shows that are happening in New York or Toronto or something, that they can still, as closely as they can, participate via live stream. They can still kind of get that sort of sense and be exposed to something that they might not be able to have nearby. So, but I think, and also musicians, they might not have to depend on a venue if they have their own kind of setup. That's more money for the artist to make. So instead of pay to play, they can charge somebody to stream, and they can keep more of the money. It's sort of like this this race to not be completely broke after 20 years of putting your life into your craft.
Yeah. I think you're muted, Mark.
Are people paying to see these live shows? These streams?
Some of them.
Some
people are like, but are people actually? So people are actually like on a, like people are making money from live streaming.
I doubt they're making much money.
Some people are, and it's not just jazz. There are artists. There are like indie artists. There are country folks that have done stuff. I think Jason Isbell did something with somebody like fairly recently. So like it is a thing across genres. It's just the industry in general is people still staying connected with listeners, but also try to get a little bit of bread in too.
Yeah. I think so Dan Tepfer, he's been doing paid shows, and he charges like $5 a show, so it's not much. And I think he still puts his shows up on YouTube afterwards. So like, it's almost like you want to support him if you want to pay. But I think part of the nice thing about the live interaction, especially with jazz, and I think it's one of the great things about jazz, is in pop or rock, when you go to see a live show, you want to hear the song the way you know it. But in jazz, it's almost the opposite. It's like, I don't want to hear exactly the same thing. It's like, I wanted to hear a new thing. And how about you play, Moondance or like do a cover of a Radiohead song if you know it. And, just improvise on the spot and have that personalized experience. And if the audience can almost affect the performance and be a part of the performance in a sense, I think maybe that's something that the live streaming setup can do. That it's a bit more difficult in like a regular live setting, unless it's a very intimate setting. But I think the live, what you're mentioning, Mark, that'll never be the same. It's probably also like, being physically in a space, like you're experiencing it with all your senses, right? It's not just like putting on headphones and maybe watching a video, like where it's just two senses. It's like you smell and you feel like the music kind of pulsing through your body. I kind of think of it like, piano. I love piano, and there's now these electronic keyboards that sound very similar to a piano. But I have a good electronic keyboard, but it will never be the same as a piano. Like a piano, it physically pushes back against you, and you can feel the floor vibrating underneath you when you play like a big chord. And that you just can't really get from some of these synthetic instruments. And live shows, I don't know, maybe it's kind of a similar thing where that multi-sensory experience is just not replicable with headphones.
Yeah, well, there's even a difference between the sound of your piano in the last episode that you did there, MUSICODE, from when you are performing in the first two tracks from when you're performing in the last track where you had mic'd the piano, right?
Yeah. Which one do you like?
I like the miking for sure because it's you're hearing you're hearing the hammer hit the string, whereas.
So the reason I didn't record when I did it with Jazz and Paul and with you is because my piano's severely out of tune right now, and I can't get a tuner to come because of COVID. So originally I recorded it with Mike, and I told Paul it's a bit out of tune, the piano. He's like, "Oh, it's okay, it's okay." I was like, he responded, he's like, "I can't record on that." It's like I can't figure out what the tuning is, so I had to switch to MIDI because
that's funny.
So it's in tune with itself mostly,
yeah.
But like if you hit a tuning fork, it's like I don't know,
that's
3/4 of a tone down or something.
Oof, that's rough.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, but you're talking about like the physicality of that of an acoustic piano. It's the same with drums. I recorded the my favorite things with you on my electronic kit, which is cool, and it's and it works well for a lot of use cases. But there's nothing like actually sitting behind. No. Some wooden shells, some metal plates, and actually, feeling it, like the touch of it, like their technology's come a long way, but even just the touch, that's a huge thing for instruments, and it's
probably more so for drums, like
really, like it's hard. They just haven't done it yet, like there's just no way to really replicate that feeling of riding on a ride cymbal, it's just not there.
Yeah. One thing I find with drums that just you can't get with the electronic kit is the drum kit. Everything is usable, right? Like you can hit the underside of the snare, or you can run your fingers over the what do you call the things underneath the snare?
The snares. Yeah. The
snares. Like you can just do this on the top, and you hear this, but you can't do that with an electronic kit.
Nope. Yeah, not quite the same. Not quite the same.
Well, we'll get to live music hopefully soon. So Alvaro says, also as an audience member, you're able to interact with famous jazz artists in ways that you're not able to in a regular concert.
That's a good point.
But I think that's not just in the virtual setting, but even in live shows, like we're talking about Chick Corea. Like I saw Chick Corea, I think he's probably the jazz artist I've seen the most. I've seen him like 5 times. And I've spoken to him like pretty much every one of the times I saw him because, they finish the show and they're just hanging out. Especially if you're like in the Blue Note in New York City, or, they literally have to walk through the tables to go up to their little room. And in the big rock heroes, good luck getting to see them.
Well, one of the first ever jazz concerts that I saw, I was working as a busboy in a jazz restaurant in Vancouver. I was maybe like 18 years old, and I didn't know jazz at all at that point.
I'll be right back.
And okay, and it was this guy, is a guitarist named Charlie Bird, and he's just like he played with Stan Getz and sort of a bossa nova guitarist, but just jazz guitarist in general. And at the time, he was like, I think a year before his death, and he was like maybe 88 or 90. He was super old, leaning over his guitar, and it was incredible. Just in this sort of tiny restaurant, full house, but everyone completely silent and just in awe of this guy. And it was it's really my first memory of being just blown away by a live performance. And that's something like if I were to see a live streaming of that right now, I just wouldn't capture the feelings that I felt watching it live in that sort of hushed out restaurant.
Yeah, it's true. And you have to think about the things that lead up to you being at that little table or at the bar at the club where you see the thing. You know what I mean? If you're live streaming, you might have, you got your PJs on, you got some popcorn, you got a beer or whatever your beverage of choice is, and you put it on and you're there. Whereas, if you go to a club, there are a lot of steps involved getting to the club. So you're in whatever frame of mind you're in, to get to this club. So sometimes you're not even ready for whatever is about to happen because you've been so distracted by all the things that it took for you to be there. You know, you gotta get to the club, gotta pay, you gotta sit down, you gotta do the thing, and then just like that anticipation of, them coming out. And no, it's definitely not something that can be replicated. Absolutely not. I 100% agree. I mean, I'm sure somebody's working on some, VR thing to where you can, be there, but you aren't, I think
No.
our bodies know better, right? Like,
Man, I can't wait.
So actually, there was a question earlier that I didn't ask. Is Mark? I don't know if you know if Montreal will have the Jazz Fest this year.
It's planned for September.
oh,
Really?
Okay.
Yeah. So usually it's in late June, early July, but they've said that they're aiming to have it in September. I don't think they have like a finalized format of what it's going to look like, but it would involve some some of the outdoor free shows. I imagine it's not going to be as big, but I think it'll probably happen. I think they'll probably have some outdoor shows, and we'll have the sort of first feelings of like normalcy.
That'll be amazing.
Yeah, definitely. It's gonna make me want to like quit my job probably.
Yeah, that's a problem because it'll be like in the school year.
Yeah.
Have you been to the Montreal Jazz Fest, Jazz?
No, unfortunately not.
It's incredible. So it's like, I don't know, is it 10 blocks or something, Mark?
Yeah, it's about that. I'd say 10 square block.
Square or something. Completely blocked off, so no cars are allowed. And just, there's, I don't know, like 15 stages of different sizes. And just from noon until 9 p.m. or even until midnight.
Till midnight, yeah.
Till midnight. Yeah, noon to midnight. Just all the stages have shows just back to back. And then in addition, there's like bigger shows in paid venues inside. It's incredible.
And then actually at midnight, actually there are 2 free shows offered till like 3 in the morning. One is usually like a sort of funk type, more like urban music, and then the other one will be a more straight up jazz show. But like it's amazing the amount. One thing like I kind of pride ourselves here in Quebec is the amount of money that they put into the arts, both in terms of like festivals like this where it's free outdoor shows, but then also like education. You can get a jazz music education in college level with great teachers for free in Quebec. Wow. And it's the only jurisdiction in North America where that exists. There's no other, even in Canada, there's no other province that has this, what they call the CEGEP system. It's a collegial system that was set up in the 60s. And, you could get a jazz education. You could also do dance or theater or, computer science or all these other different things. But it's, they have it for music, and it's really filled with amazing talent because generations and generations have gone through that system and then become the teachers for it later on. So you have this huge pool of talented musicians in Quebec because of that. It's quite. I like to sort of spread that gospel as much as I can.
That's where you got your jazz education.
Yeah, I got my jazz education in a publicly funded college, and it was you pay administration fees like $200 a year or something like that.
Well, I wish that existed in the States. It's like jazz is a U.S. form of art, and we just don't give it any love. It's terrible. We sort of have we'll build this jazz thing or this jazz thing over there, but then it's like I want to go and really study this art and try to contribute to it, and it's like okay, well that'll be depending on where you go, that'll be $60,000 a year or something. You know what I mean? It's insane. It's nuts. Yeah. So that's pretty cool that exists in Montreal.
One other thing that in the Jazz Fest that's super cool at midnight, like once the regular festival ends, they usually have jam sessions, and a lot of like the famous artists, go and show up at these jam venues. It's pretty incredible, intimidating as well. Sure.
It's like go sit in with them. You're like I don't know.
No, actually no. I'm good. So if you got to play with one artist, living or dead, like jams. Maybe there's no audience. You're given the opportunity to play with one person for I don't know, an hour, 2 hours. Who would you pick?
Just like anybody, or just jazz? Like, what are you?
Anybody, yes.
Anybody. Oof. Man, you keep asking these very difficult questions. Probably either Chick Corea, because that was somebody I always wanted to play with. And the other person that I always thought would be like just an absolute like blast would be Prince.
Yeah.
You know, like that kind of, because you hear the stories about like those epic after shows, like that was the show.
Yeah.
It's like you'd have the show, but then there was the stuff afterward that was like, that was
So,
party.
I read this funny thing about Prince. So Weird Al Yankovic, he does like all these parody songs of things, and I guess once he got invited to one of these award ceremonies, like I don't know if it was the Grammys or something, and I guess he was his seat was like in the same row as Prince, and he received a note from like Prince's manager like a few days before the ceremony to please not make eye contact with Prince, and everybody on Prince's row received it.
It's like Ellen DeGeneres.
Is that what she does?
That was one of the like things that she was criticized for. Is like there was some like production in Australia, and everyone was told don't look Ellen DeGeneres in the eyes.
I wonder if they do that because they're serious, or they're doing that just to mess with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Mark? Who's the?
I mean, like in terms of singers, just to like sort of hang out with and check him out is definitely Bobby McFerrin. I've seen him perform 3 times in Montreal, and like just some of the most memorable shows I've seen. Especially the first one. The first one was with him and his voicestra. So it was like, sort of him, it's I remember the concert started off where the first few songs where he would just sort of start a groove that came to his head and give it to like, the bass section of his voicestra. And they would take over that groove, and then he would add the next layer onto it and hand it off to the next section, and so on and so forth. Until he had just built this sort of, wall of sound, and then he would improvise over that. And I just love the spontaneity of it, the sort of spontaneous, not just like, improvising over something, but a spontaneous creation of a groove and of a sound. And then I remember throughout the concert, he sort of passed the torch off to the other musicians, the other vocalist in that concert, and it was just such a everyone had something new to bring, and it just ranged. The whole concert was just like a range of all the emotions you can imagine, from humor to like majestic to dark to, it just had everything in it, and to just get to participate in that as a musician would have been so much fun, I think. And then just in terms of playing with someone, like there's so many names, right? But it would be fun, I think, as a vocalist to just like play, like sing ballads with Bill Evans backing you up. It would be just like a beautiful, just like you just wrap your voice with so much, beautiful voicings and everything. I think that would be quite enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I mean, there's so many piano players I love, but I kind of feel like I don't know if I'd want to, like my one choice would be a piano player, because then I'd probably just feel bad about my piano playing. But I also really like because I guess came from hard rock and all that. I love like odd times and like kind of complicated rhythms and things like that. And so I feel like it should be somebody that gets that stuff. So I think my 2 would be like Tony Williams, maybe, just because he can make everything sound good, and maybe Esperanza Spalding.
Oh yeah.
Because she has the bass and the voice, and she has all the complexity and all the simplicity, and I don't know, she rocks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I saw her live actually at the Jazz Fest here in Montreal.
Oh, cool.
She's awesome, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, she got huge, playing everywhere.
Yeah, it was funny whenever she got the Grammy for Best New Artist, and I was
Yeah.
like, "We've known about SB for years. Like, what do you?"
But it's
Like,
new
you know,
for
like,
non-jazz people.
right, exactly. You know, and I remember that year people were upset that their favorite didn't win, but it's like she's actually musical. This is great.
Yeah.
You know, like shouldn't a musician win this? So. Yeah.
Did you see? Speaking of, she was like ahead of her time. The live streaming album she did, 77, I think it was called.
No.
I remember you showed me that.
Yeah, so I don't know. She decided she was going to like hook up cameras in this recording studio, like all over the place,
Yeah.
and just live stream for 77 hours. And she was going to write a whole new album from scratch and record it in 77 hours and film the whole thing. And she did it, yeah. So she had like Robert Glasper playing it, Lila Hathaway played it. And you could see her like writing through songs, and she had these big like pieces of paper where she'd write lyrics, and she'd work on the bass grooves and like record ideas, and then sort of start doing harmonies. Incredible. 77 hours. She barely slept.
Yeah, I bet, and like that should be, sort of this is what it takes, like
Yeah.
don't get bent out of shape for, if you only paid $10 for Spotify a month, because this is how much work goes into that thing,
Yeah, I actually got one of those. So she sold like, I think 777 LPs. That was it. And so she ripped the papers where she wrote the lyrics, and you get a little piece of the paper.
That's cool. That's awesome. Very cool. Yeah, I heard about it, but I still haven't checked it out, so I should.
It's cool. What I like about her, again, like what I was mentioning about, like, Herbie Hancock and things like that just reinventing herself. Her first album was pretty jazzy, like kind of out there. But did you hear the De-Evolution one? Like, it's just super rocky and, my brother took my dad to see her in Peru. My dad likes jazz, but I think that was a bit too wild for him. But no, that was cool. Like doing that, recording the whole process, like literally 24 hours for I don't know, whatever, 3 days or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's nuts.
I don't think that would be very fun.
To do or to watch?
I mean, to do for 24 hours would be like, I don't know. I mean, it's sort of like, people who do like the 10-day retreat where they're not allowed to talk to people and do anything. It's like that kind of pain. It's like not for me kind of thing,
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely takes a certain type of person to want to do that.
Yeah.
But super impressive. So we've been here an hour and a half, so maybe it's a good time to.
We did well.
We did very well. Yeah, I've been watching people connecting. We got quite a number of people connected. Not all my family. No, but thanks for doing this. This was awesome.
Do you know if Herbie Hancock stopped by? Or?
Yeah. He was shy. He wanted to ask a question. He wrote me privately. He's like, some of the questions when I said it, I didn't say who asked it. It was him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was all him. Yeah, all the questions. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this, Pablo.
This was awesome.
It was nice meeting you, Jazz. Hopefully, we'll see you in real life one day.
Yeah, seriously. Hopefully, sooner rather than later here. And stay safe. Hopefully, we'll get through this soon.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Pablo.
Happy Jazz Day.
Thanks. Happy Jazz Day.
Bye.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.